So the way I like to do things in terms of the agenda and of the minutes is sort of a without objection, like Congress does it. So rather than having a motion and a second and a vote, I'll just say if there are no objections, we will accept the agenda as it's written. So have you all had a chance to look at the agenda?
Yes.
If there are no objections, we will proceed with that agenda.
Yep.
Hearing none, we will proceed. Because this is an unusual meeting, this is the first meeting after the annual meeting, so we have to decide who our permanent officers are going to be. I welcome any suggestions or nominations or suggestions.
David,
Go ahead, Dean.
will the 4 temporary officers agree to run again?
I can't speak for everybody. Stu says a thumbs up. I say a thumb up. KJ, would you be willing to? Yeah.
I would be, yes.
And Kai is not on board yet, but I'm sure Kai is comfortable with that too. So
Yeah,
Well, then
we're planning to get together to talk about what he needs to do.
right.
Well, I would move to nominate the 4 temporary officers to continue to be the permanent officers.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
second? Okay.
Can you
Dean moved and Marty seconded. Go ahead.
can
Patrick.
you just clarify? I'm sorry if I don't follow or I'm not up to speed, just being the new guy here.
That's
your
okay.
person,
Questions are
yeah.
always welcome.
Yeah, what does that actually mean, the temporary officers? And
So at the annual meeting, we elect a slate of temporary officers to
yeah,
be
okay.
officers from the time of the annual meeting until this meeting. And
Right.
then we give everybody the chance to back out if they have common sense. And if they don't, we elect them for the next 11 meetings. So
There's perfect qualifications for an officer of WRT. No comment.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I follow now.
are there any other questions or discussion? We have a motion from Dean and a second from Marty. All in favor, say aye or give us a hands up.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? The motion carries. Congratulations, officers. We are now permanent. The draft June meeting minutes were in the folder and were linked on the agenda. If there are any questions from those, Kai, it's too late. We elected you permanent treasurer, so you can't back out now.
That's okay. I was fine with that already. That was the ideal outcome.
Yep. So any questions or corrections for the June draft minutes? Hearing none, we will consider the June minutes approved. I have no communications from the public. Well, I maybe should say something. I just got an email from Esty Denur, and she had at the annual meeting, I think, asked the board to consider creating a committee. Let me get her wording here. To create a committee to look at new technologies in order to remain relevant. And Esty couldn't be with us tonight. I told Esty in a response email that the staff and board are already in the process of doing that. So Shally is working to get more and more of the public affairs programming as podcasts. And that requires a lot of work because we have to edit music out because the Digital Millennium Copyright Act prevents us from posting music for more than 2 weeks. And podcasts last more than 2 weeks. So, but Esty didn't think I was giving her enough credit for her suggestion, and I tried to correct that and say, yes, not only am I giving you credit for that, but we're already doing it. So I am cautious about creating more committees because of the workload factors. But if anybody has any comments on that, I would welcome them. Go ahead, Shelley.
Hi. Yes, Esty has brought that up with me, and I don't think she's wrong. We had a conversation about it between us, and I told her to pursue this. I'm sure she would uncover some new technologies that would be helpful to know about and try to implement. As I communicated to her, there are already committees working on this, and I hope that this would be tomato sauce on my chin. I hope this would be something that the engineering committee could build in to their consideration of in their workflow for the new soundboards, right? So I gave SC kind of two big immovable objects here to get through. As you know, during the annual meeting, we discussed that this has already been highlighted. This isn't like new information. We know how to do this. We have experimented with StreamYard, which is great because you can host discussions that are great audio quality over video that are then posted on YouTube and Facebook simultaneously and automatically archived. Then you can use that embed from YouTube to be the archive. It's not that that's impossible. It's actually a great idea. The two main hindrances to implementing that immediately are hardware. So the main hindrance to doing video with the boards that we have is that we are not able to pipe in very well the other things happening on the soundboard. We kind of have encountered issues, and with the soundboards changing, I know the engineering committee has long kicked around the idea of using that fourth channel as like the kind of HD connect to video thing, channel, right? That will mix in the music and the audio coming from the computers and the audio coming from the phone calls, the callers, right? And so it'd be nice to have a more unified way of doing that. We could probably get away with doing that right now, just having it up on the computer. But the second issue is time in the time of our part-time employees. And so Dave mentioned a little bit of what Rochelle does, but that is far from the full scope of her job. Posting the podcast takes time. Posting to the website takes time. Writing up a quality web description and fact-checking it, fact-checking the spelling and adding links and creating the image so that it doesn't distort weirdly on the website. Doing all of that, posting to the podcast, sending the links out, managing social media. Rochelle's maxed out with the hours that she is currently allocated. She is planning to leave within the next 2 to 6 months, and I am severely concerned about recruiting the next person that is her caliber of professionalism for $15 an hour. And so coming to you soon will be a proposal to expand that position, and I'd like to be able to expand that position for a lot of reasons, one of which is to incorporate some of the new technologies that SD is mentioning. But we can't add anything to Rochelle's plate now. To give you an idea of what you would be managing, you have to set up a link for each of these conversations. You have to run it past the guest that they will be on video. That's a frequent question that we get. Is this going to be videotaped or is this just audio? Right now, our response is this is just audio. Don't worry, you can be dressed in your pantsuit and you'll be fine, or jumpsuit, pajamas, you'll be fine. That changes with this, and you will then have to decide, am I managing this on StreamYard? Am I managing this on Google Meet? And then you have to get the physical infrastructure set up, and you need to troubleshoot. And there's a lot that you can do with StreamYard, and to do it well, that will also take some time to do the graphics, right?
Right.
So there's a lot to manage here. And she is maxed out. She is already going over her hours when I'm like, you need to go home. I will do the rest. So that's where we are.
And we don't have a part-time producer for the buzz. So.
Okay, and so Susan has pushback, and so that's something that can be examined, right, when I give you the full request and the narrative. We are currently waiting on June numbers to do our budget review, and we will see how our hours have impacted the budget. But my main point is I don't think you need a new committee to do this. I hope that SD can join the engineering committee, and this can be a work group on the engineering committee, because yes, we should be looking at new solutions. You also need to look at funding people to manage those new technologies, because they do not spring out of nowhere. I am circulating through web posters. I can't get people to stick around to be web posters. This week I lost my labor radio web poster. That drives an inordinate amount of traffic to our website. So these are volunteers, they cycle in and out. And so if you want it to maintain that quality, you need to pay them. So
Yeah, Dave,
Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Shelley gave us a lot of detail to what I thought was kind of a vague request. But Shelley really, I think, demonstrated that the staff is already working on this. So I think what I'm comfortable with is referring back to Shelley to let her continue this work and come back to us with something more specific that we can then weigh in on. Shelley's way ahead of me on this, and I can't really add anything more than just to when the staff feels it's ready to make a concrete proposal, then we can get in on it. And I'm comfortable with what she was saying and where we're at, and I don't think it's going to be very long before that we see this proposal.
Shelley asks that we have the engineering committee do this and not Shelley, because the engineering committee knows more.
Yeah.
I have issues with that because the engineering committee talks about engineering, not about how we're going to raise revenue and not about how we're going to add staff. So it's all organic. It all fits everything. But I think the engineering committee is a good place to start. So go ahead.
I think it might be wise to ask Esty if she would like to head up a work group on the engineering committee. I just hope that she can sit in on those discussions with the engineering committee and frankly provide the perspective of a programmer, which I know the engineering committee might not always have in mind. They have the technology in mind, but usability and how this fits in with workflow, I think are really valuable perspectives to if someone will use it. So I hope that she can go to the engineering committee and head up a work group of people interested in doing this. I know Laura has expressed some interest in doing that. So I think the two would make a dynamic duo, and more are welcome. But I think that's the appropriate place to put this.
Tom is here in the meeting, cringing behind his screen. Do you have any response, Tom?
I have to. It's all doable. Like Shelley said, it's even doable right now. Most of me says, why put the effort in if we're going to be replacing the stuff within the next 6 months right now anyway. But yeah, we have to do something different than what we have been doing. We just have to define it.
Well, thank you. Shelley, I like the idea of not creating a separate committee, but maybe making this part of the engineering committee. Engineering committee is not well defined to begin with, but we've worked well enough for all this time, so I don't think we need to mess with that anymore. So I'll reach out to Esty and ask her about her thoughts on that, and I'll get back to you and the board. So thank you for that. Any other discussion on that question?
Dave, it looks like Susan and Laura have their hands raised.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me know. Laura, go ahead.
I think Susan was first, so.
Oh, okay, Susan, go ahead.
I'm unmuted, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. I can't find the mute thing on the screen. I just want to talk to the fact that it's not, to me, looking ahead, it's not technology alone that we need to be looking at. I don't know that by taking a radio show, stripping it of music, and calling it a podcast, you've significantly made a difference in what it is. People don't generally start out with radio shows when they turn them into podcasts. They start out as a podcast. And it's a totally different thing than a radio show. But I'm going to stay away from that period and just say, when I talked at the, oh, wait, before I say anything, Laura, it is great to see you again. And I just want to congratulate all the people that became new members of the board. I'm really thrilled by having you here. And I welcome your presence. And my name is Susan. I'm at susan@WORT-FM.org if you ever have a question. So to go back to this, what I was talking about at the annual meeting and what I put in my notes many times, at different times, planning and at annual meetings, is a discussion about the fact that I believe we need to expand beyond the idea of radio, beyond the idea of podcast, and really turn ourselves into a place where people can come who want to get their message out to the world in a variety of ways. We continue the radio station, but we become much more than that. And that isn't anything that's being looked at by any committee. And I think it isn't the repackaging of radio or adding more staff to work on radio that is going to get us out of where we are heading. It is reimagining ourselves, just like the bookstores that are still around, the independent bookstores, reimagine themselves as community centers. Our station has to think of ourselves as something else. And I don't see anyone working on that. So when you say, oh, give it to engineering or talking about technology, granted, technology isn't my field. I learn it when I have to use it. But this isn't the solution to me. And I feel like I'm like a lone duck sitting here saying, why aren't we looking outside the technology? So that's all I'm going to say. I have had many discussions with Esty. She's asked me why I haven't brought this up. And I said, I bring it up, but it goes nowhere.
Thank you. We also have a hand up from Laura and from Kai. Go ahead, Laura.
So this is not something that there will be a solution to. This is an ongoing process. We constantly need to evaluate and upgrade and, and change our direction. I think that terrestrial radio is headed towards its end, and the digital aspect of what we do is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. I just want people to know that we talk about this all the time in the engineering committee. We discuss it. We have a Discord server that we use, and we discuss it on that constantly. I invite anyone who's interested in talking about new technology to the engineering committee's Discord server. Maybe we can set up a special channel for this discussion, but I don't think it's certainly there's new technology all the time, but I want to go back to what Shali was saying. I think that we need to, unfortunately, I think it comes down to needing more hours, staff hours, to hire somebody whose major purpose is to work on the digital content that we're putting up. That's the way people are accessing us. That's the way youth will be accessing us. The younger people, younger generations, is all online and through mobile devices, and terrestrial radio is something we just have to be able to let go of. So not that I'm saying we turn off our transmitter, but I'm, just so you know that this is discussion that's been ongoing for a long time. Thanks.
Thanks. Kai?
So based on some of Shawley's items that she wrote about in her report, I do think that this all plays into the larger idea of making WORT into like an educational center where people can learn how to become journalists and report on community news. I think it's like if you don't invest into it, then how can you ever see the future come into fruition? And I feel like by putting that sort of effort into it, we can achieve some of the outcomes that you want, Susan, as well as the desire that Shawley has to make this more of a podcasting center, put our work out there and modernize with the technology. I think there is a future that accomplishes both of those, and especially with some of the grant funding applications that we've been looking at. I mean, it might not be as much of an issue as we are looking at it to be. So I don't think we should discount it quite yet, but I think they are relevant questions to ask. And as we put more effort into making proposals and looking at budget outlines, I think we can. I'm hopeful that we can find a way to, address both issues: the financial feasibility of it, as well as making it more of a community center with its community reporting.
Thank you, Kai. I have my hand up because I wanted to add a couple of things as well. I will second the notion that the engineering committee does talk about these kind of things a lot. And we have the problem of the chicken and the egg. If you don't have the budget, you can't create the content, and you can't create the content if you don't have the money. So we're trying to do both at the same time. That's why we're pressing on new ways to donate on the website and using different mechanisms. And I think we need to continue in that direction. I want to point out, Susan, that before, in the before times, we used to do our evening news shows live on the air, and the people would bring their scripts into the studio and read them live. Now, the individual scripts are recorded and then assembled at airtime, which is a change in the way technology works. But in so doing, we already have those different parts broken out where they can be put out on the internet as individual pieces. So, but again, the problem is, how do we get the time to do that? I want to point out to Kai that when we made Aaron a full-time person, we changed his title to digital production director, and so the idea was to move more into the idea of producing in digital form, and then using that produced content both on the air and on the net. So that's that way we get the most efficiency by using that content twice. We need to do more work, and we need to figure out ways to maximize the online donations towards podcasting and for digital content on our website. So we have a pre-roll that says, please donate, but I think we need to have a little button in front of people that says, push here to donate $1 to WORT or something like that. So But anyway, I'm going to stop now because I don't want to take up more time. Are other people interested in this discussion? Moving on. The executive committee took 2 actions between the annual meeting and now. The first action was memorandum of agreement regarding the cost of living increases. The WORT staff is covered by a union contract, and that contract had a cost of living increase. And the staff on their own looked at what the cost of living increases would be and looked at our current income and decided that it would be a challenge for the station to pay those increased cost of living wages without seeing an increase in revenue coming into the station. So on their own volition, they negotiated an amendment and a lower amount, and that was presented by the union to the board and the executive committee, and the executive committee approved that. The other thing that we did was of approved purchase for some promotional items. We needed some items to take to our public events, more stickers and so on. So the executive committee approved that item. The links on the agenda linked to those 2 items, if you have questions about those, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about those items now. Susan reminds me on chat that we also wanted more money to go to part-time people. So there was an increase in the wages for part-time people, which the part-time staff are not covered by the contract. But well, that's interesting. I'm going to ask more questions offline about that. So, but Susan said that full-time staff voluntarily gave up some of the COLA increase, which is, I think, what I said. So, questions or discussion?
Just saying, when we talked about it, Dave, it was totally as a way to give the part-time people more money. It wasn't looking at the budget or anything else. We just said, we feel like our part-time people are relatively underpaid. They don't have a contract. We think it's easier to get approval from the board if we give up some of that. And we also, if you guys see our good faith about wanting to help them out, that you'd be willing to also sign off on it. So that was the whole discussion. We, as a staff, didn't, in my memory, have any discussion of we're not doing well enough to do this, to give ourselves 6%. It was also a recognition that for 5 years, we took 3% increases, even when the COLA wasn't 3%, because the contract had an automatic 3%. And we were recognizing that we were getting those, even though there was little to no inflation during that period. So that was the discussion. Just want to clarify what staff discussed.
Very good. Thank you. Questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I just wanted to thank the staff for their consideration of all the sides of this issue. And you know, coming from, you may not know my history, but I used to be a part-timer at the station. So I'm well aware of, you know, how difficult these decisions can be. So thank you to the staff for moving on this.
I'll just say, Laura, your case, and in my case, I am way too lazy to not have a part-time person, and you were a valuable part-time person. And we realized that as much as you can't run without staff, part-time, full-time staff, our part-time staff is a group of such talented people. And we just want to make sure we hold on to them as much as we hold on to talented full-time people. So I just want to tell you, this arises out of my extreme laziness. If I lost Karen, I don't think I could function in the fundraising department. So thank you, but I'm not as altruistic as you think I am.
No, but you're looking at the big picture.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, okay, that's true.
All right. Other questions? Oh, Stu, sorry, I see your hand, Stu, sorry. You're muted, Stu. You're quiet for some reason. I'm not hearing you, Stu, even though you're not muted, so. No,
Is it, there we go, there we go,
there we go.
I probably should have raised this during the approval of the agenda, but a motion to approve is not, either of these items is not really in order. What the bylaws provide for is that a motion to reconsider by any member of the board is in order. So we don't need an affirmative motion to approve because the matter is subject to a motion to reconsider if anyone wants to move that. But absent a motion to reconsider, the executive committee's actions stand as approved.
Thank you. That was, when I wrote that in the agenda, I was trying to explain that the executive committee approved, not that we were looking for board approval for those things. So thank you for that clarification. If the board wants to reconsider either of those two items, as well as anytime we have executive committee action between meetings, the board can always reconsider those actions. So seeing no further hands up and no further discussion, I will move on. The Finance Committee meeting notes and the financial statements, including our credit union balances, are linked in the agenda. I don't know if people have taken a follow on those links to see what our reports are. We continue to be in good shape in terms of our bank balances. Our revenue is not going to sustain those bank balances if our revenue hasn't gone up as much as our one-time events have gone up. So we need to continue to work on broadening our fundraising. So questions about financial statements or financial meeting notes? Hearing none.
I have one, just where can those be found? Just and the new person question here.
Yeah. So so it's on Google Drive, and it's in the shared drive section, and it's in board and staff, and then board meeting information, and then the year of 2022, and then July, and then you'll find the agenda for the meeting there. And the agenda has hot links that are clickable. So you can follow those links to go to all those other places. So I also put a link in that folder to the financial folder. And when there's links to other documents that are elsewhere on the drive, I put links to them in the monthly folder so that people can follow them without having to know where they are. So we require more computer access of board members to be able to read things. We don't produce huge books for every meeting, which with all the reports printed in them. So we have to look at them online. So, and I would be happy to, outside of a meeting, set up time with anybody to go over how to, to get more dexterous on handling Google Drive and Gmail and so on. So.
Yeah, if I could take you up on that outside the meeting, Dave, that would be great.
I'd be happy to do that. And I think what I do is announce it ahead of time, and we just set up a Zoom meeting and anybody could join, and it would be a good review for people who already know it, and people could tell me a lot about how to do all these things. So we all pull each other up by our bootstraps. So the programming committee report is there.
Before we move on,
Go
Dave,
ahead.
I was wondering about I don't see any kind of report on expenditures or anything that has figures in it. We used to have those when I was on the board the last time. I see some mention about key indicators and that sort of thing. Have we just dispensed with more detailed financial discussions at the board meetings?
If you go to the link in the agenda that says financial statements, including credit union balances, that leads you to a Google Docs or a Google Drive directory with about 8 or 10 different reports in them. Profit and loss year to date, budget versus actual, all sorts of things. So
Okay.
rather than try to distill that down, my approach has been to err on the side of giving people as much information as I can. So, but that requires everybody to do more work on following those links and looking at those reports. The hardest thing to do is to look at profit and loss statements or balance sheets. There's probably more information than you care to know in that place, but the problem is that if the board doesn't have access to that stuff, it can't really be managing the financial stability of the station. So it has to be there, and the more eyes we have looking at that stuff, the better. It might make sense to have some sort of just like there's a technical discussion for people in how to use Google Drive and so on. There might be also some use to having a discussion about the finances. There's also no reason that more people can't join the finance committee meetings. So, because we do discuss those items, those reports in much more detail. And we've just recently switched to a new version of QuickBooks, and we're using an enterprise version of QuickBooks now, and it has a number of different reports that are built in. And so as Mary Joy becomes more familiar with it, she's going to be able to produce more dashboard reports that we can make available that sort of show a thumbnail of what our financial health is. So I know that Susan's been after that for a long time and looking for key performance indicators and so on. And we hope to be able to present that to the board. So.
Okay, I was hoping maybe for some kind of a summary from the treasurer.
Well, we've just changed over to Kai being our new treasurer, and he's just getting his sea legs or whatever. So.
And I understand all that. I'm talking about moving forward or
yep.
What we might expect.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you for your interest, because that's a vital part of what we do as the board. So. Tom points out, in order to be able to see things like Google Drive for WORT, you have to be logged in with your WORT-FM.org address. And that's one of the things I can go over on this separate meeting that I talked about in terms of using Google Drive. If you have multiple Google accounts, like I have three different accounts, I have to be logged into the WORT-FM account to be able to see the WORT-FM Google Drive. And if I'm logged in my other accounts, I don't have access to those. So I will, after this meeting, set up a time and ask questions about who can show up at a particular time for such a meeting. So
that'd be great.
I did not pull out any action items in any of the other reports.
Oh,
And
Dave, before we move on completely,
yes, Guy.
can I just address I just wanted to address the Finance Committee item notes. Laura, if you want to direct a response this question, what sort of information was presented as the treasurer to the greater board? If you could just give me some context, because I'm not as familiar with it, but I tried to take very detailed notes about what transpired during that meeting. So I had hoped that would have been enough, but yeah, I can do maybe a summary level at the beginning, and maybe that would provide some insight. Maybe what you wanted more was some commentary on the profit and loss statement and where we are, how we're doing overall. Is that kind of what was missing from the report?
So what I was looking for, a lot of it is in the financial statements. Before the meeting, I had not seen that. I had seen the Finance Committee meeting notes, which did not have any facts or figures in it, which is what had concerned me. So I did not have this link until the minutes came out and have not had a chance to review it. I can go back to those previous board meetings that I had attended and maybe, look at those and compare those, reports from the treasurers. But to be honest with you, I don't know that they conveyed a lot of information, but people's eyes glazed over, and I don't think that a lot of people understood them. I was just hoping that maybe moving forward, we can come up with a method for conveying the salient financial state of the station without getting into too much detail.
I see your point,
and I'll talk to you. I
Yes,
can talk to you offline
maybe we
about
can
this.
talk about that. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I work on the agenda for each meeting starting shortly after the previous meeting. And the way I do it is to make a copy of the current month's agenda and then put that copy in the next month's Google Drive folder, and then go in and edit it and change the name to, in this case, I'll change it to the August meeting, and I'll delete all the current references from the July meeting so that the skeleton is still there, but as staff and committee reports are issued out, I will put the links into the agenda. I keep quietly working behind the scenes on committees and staff to get their reports out sooner, so that the board can start, maybe even in the Sunday preceding the Wednesday board meeting, can start looking online to look at those reports and make sense of them. So but
please don't take the questions that I'm asking as, criticism. I'm just looking for clarification, that's all.
Sure, understood. Thank you. Now, I didn't see any action items in the remaining things. Sybil said that she had action items in hers, but I think they're going to be action items in the next meeting or in a future meeting.
No, Dave,
there is an action item for Shawley's report, the News and Public Affairs report.
And there is an
right.
action. I'm sorry, Kai, finish. And there is an action item in Sybil's report. She sent an amended report that they want a policy approved for guests in the studio. It was sent late this afternoon.
I read that and she said that that's a proposal, but it hasn't been, she hasn't proposed it to the board yet. The staff is still working on it.
We're done with it. We just haven't set a date on it because we're watching right now. There's such a spike in COVID, but this is the proposal when we see a time that this will work. So you won't see a date on it, but the staff has finished the language and that's the policy we want to do with COVID, but we feel the board has the final approval on that.
Susan, can I ask you a question about the policy? And I guess it also goes to Tom and Shelley. I'm trying to figure out why there's why there are two different paragraphs. It looks like substantively, unless there's a big difference between submitting notice and getting approval, is that the reason for the
that's the difference, because there's so few people in the at the station after 8 p.m. We're not really interested, but we're trying to monitor how many people are going to be here at a time during the day. There's a lot of people at the station that are doing a lot of different work. We don't want a lot of guests here.
Okay, I get it. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I would suggest that you put the provision regarding masks in public areas more prominent in the final policy, as opposed to.
Well, if you guys want to send any suggestions back to us, we'll redo it. If you don't want to approve it the way it is, can you just let us know what you'd like to see changed?
Yeah, fine.
I think that's a great idea, that people have to stay aware that we're keeping up everything else. And if you just want to send it down and say rework it, that's fine too.
I'm posting Sybil's report, and I'll highlight here. She says we're not asking for approval yet. So as far as I can tell, that's not an action item.
Fine.
That's not what the staff agreed on, so.
Then we send it back.
Okay.
Yeah, go clarify it and then we'll take care of it next month. And
I think Tom and I can both tell you that the Sybil has merely written the wrong words and she offered to put it in there. But the staff sent up exactly those words, the direction in the staff meeting. And we're just concerned that if we want to make this operative in, say, August 7th, and you guys haven't approved it since then, we're going to have to go back and it'll be, I guess, for the executive committee to decide.
So Susan, what you're saying is that you want, the staff's idea is to have this policy approved with the date subject to staff's determination?
Yes.
Okay, I would move approval of the policy with the amendment to put the provision regarding wearing masks in public and the sign in boldface at in a more prominent area on the policy.
I'll second that.
Procedural question, who's doing what here?
In what regard?
Who's writing this policy as a policy? Is that something that KJ should write as a motion, or
actually,
let me say it this way. I want to refer this back to the staff to
no.
Okay.
The only place it should be referred, if you're going to refer it, the only place to refer it is the Policy and Bylaws Committee.
So our understanding was we had a COVID work group or whatever we were calling it, and that disintegrated. And then it seemed to devolve to the staff to be setting COVID policy, but this was always under the approval, we were believed, of the board. So now that we're coming up with a new part of how it's going to work to bring gifts in, now that staff is back, receptionists are back, we have things in place as we believe for guests, other than the fact that there's a spike in right now in COVID, we thought that it was our job to come up to it with the policy to approve by the board. If you guys feel it's not staff policy and that goes someplace, you know, the staff shouldn't be making these decisions, then that's fine. That's a,
No, having the board vote on it means that we're making the policy decision and you're implementing it. So I would, if my second will permit, I would like to amend my motion to add an additional provision that staff has authority to suspend the policy allowing guests in the station and will notify the board if that is done. I think that's important.
is there a final sentence on, Sybil's is supposed to say, this is subject to
Modifications, yeah.
because we envision that sometimes we'll allow more guests then, or sometimes we'll suspend it, or sometimes, yeah.
At this point, I think I trust the board to stop letting guests in. I don't want to give, I mean, you're asking for staff authority to have parties.
We're actually just, I'm just saying that we thought that the part that you want to change was that if you want to say this is subject to change by the board as commission, I'm fine with that, but we thought that final sentence was taking care of that still. That this wasn't set in stone, that modifications might have to be made based on the conditions changing with COVID.
The board may modify this policy on recommendation of the staff, period.
Sure.
So I'd move to amend the policy as proposed there by striking that last sentence and inserting instead, this policy is subject to modification by the board, comma, on recommendation of the staff, period.
Agreed.
I am uncomfortable making a vote on something like that without a written policy in front of us that everybody agrees on.
This, I don't understand, this is the policy. What
This
is
is
it?
this is a report that has a recommendation in the middle of it, and I want to have a separate document that says this is the policy.
Well, it would, all that's required is to excerpt. I'm moving as a policy the text that is in blue boldface in Sybil's amended report with amendments. And all that is required, and it is identified as a policy contained in the body of her report. All that's required after approval of that motion, if it is approved, is to retype it and put it in, I don't even know where it would go. I mean, it's in the minutes as a policy.
Well, eventually I want to have all of our policies on the website on the section where we have other policies, so that all the policies are in one place. But be that as it may,
I don't think such a document exists at the moment.
Well, hang on. So,
Yeah.
so staff worked collaboratively on this for several weeks. We already have a document that's just this document. If you want it, I can share you on that. There's no-
Charlie, the problem is that Sybil's notes say it's not a proposal.
You're okay.
That's what's the
We
struggle.
realized at the staff meeting that no one had sent it to the board, and we were like, oh crap, one of us will send it along to the board. I'm not sure we were agreed that we wanted like explicit approval. I don't even know if that's something you can do without a date. We just wanted to let the board know and have their general okay, so maybe that's an approval, that the language looked good, and kind of have these conversations about how any language that might need to be adjusted. So when we decided to reopen, we could go, all right, we're going to start implementing this and let the board know that, so we can move quickly. That's it. So however you break that down.
I would welcome Stu's motion and as amended, and Dean's second, and we can vote on that. I would personally vote not in favor of that, and prefer to have a policy sent to the board and an executive committee, and the executive committee can turn that around in 24 to 48 hours.
Dave,
rather
among,
than, go ahead.
no, finish your thought, then I'll ask a question. I'm sorry.
Rather than sign a blank check. So
Dave is
your, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Kai.
Is your concern, Dave, a procedural one? Like you don't like the procedural process of how we're going about it? Like you're not opposed to the policy, right? You're just opposed to the way in which it's being carried out?
That's correct.
Okay, just curious.
Oh, okay, but Dave, I'm unclear. Is it that the date is unspecified? What additional clarification in a quote policy would you want that is not in the document? Is it the date? Is it the conditions under which the staff would say, okay, now we're going to start having volunteers? What is the element that's missing in your mind?
That it's part of a report rather than a separate
that's that's meaningless. That's not a valid objection, because that's merely a formatting matter. It is the policy is there's clearly a document labeled policy. It's put on a document that's part of a staff report, but it is the policy. So with all due respect, that's not an argument. That's not a position I can make any sense out of. The question is, what in the policy do you find inadequate? Would you like the executive committee? Would you like staff to notify the executive committee upon its decision and give us 48 hours to countermand it? That seems a reasonable position for us to have, to reserve to the board, through the executive committee, that ultimate responsibility. I think that's legitimate. I think Susan agrees with that.
Yes.
But there is a policy document in front of us. Now, maybe you don't like doing committee work on the floor. That's
a different thing.
That's it. Yeah, Dave, but the minutes will not post Sybil's report. That's already included in the minutes will only publish the policy that we're voting on. So you will have your single-eyed policy proposal that we vote on it'll be reflected in the minutes, not just in her report. So it will be there in the minutes, because that's what we're taking action on, and only the words that define the policy will be in the minutes, not in the entire report and everything that surrounds it. So it'll be there in the format I think that you want.
So let me go on a rant for a minute. When you look through WORT policies and when you look through the WORT handbook, you'll find policies that don't indicate when they were approved or even if they were approved by the board, and the date that they were approved. So it's really hard to go back and reconstruct WORT in the past, because we do such a sloppy job of keeping track of things. So I want a document that says this is a policy that was proposed by the board, by the staff, and then approved by the board on Wednesday, July 20th. And that would be a standalone document that would then be posted to the WORT webpage under whatever that's called, where the policies are. So now I'm willing to write that up as a document, but I want to make sure that when we amend things or when we rephrase things, that's approved. And then secondly, I think that the board should approve the actual date when the staff decides on August 10th that they want to go ahead and open it up. I'd like the board to say, yes, we agree, even if it's the executive committee. So Stu's proposal of letting the board override would be okay with me.
Yeah. The way I would amend it is at the top where it says WORT guest policy, summer 2022, comma, effective on a date to be recommended by the staff and approved by the executive committee, period.
Okay.
And that is how I would amend to cover that point. And then I'd strike, and then I just, the Scrivener's corrections to take care of where it says insert date. And I'd also say at the end, the policy is subject to modification by the board upon recommendation of the staff as conditions warrant.
Would you be willing to
yeah,
cut and paste and make a document, and then we'll put that in with the minutes? So
oh yeah, I mean, if I open up the Google Docs will that then suffice?
That's a PDF. Unfortunately, it's not a doc, so you have to sort of cut and paste the text.
Well, no, it looks like if I open up in
Do you want me to share on the currently existing document?
I think I can handle this.
Okay, we could just use the same document.
Stu, can Shelley share the
Okay.
document that they've been working on?
Fine. But I mean, I'm typing on the Google Doc on Sybil's report with the policy in it, open in Google Docs. Are people seeing that? Can people see those changes I'm making? If somebody opens up the Sybil's report and opens up her report in Google Docs.
I don't think you should be editing other people's reports.
Okay. I was trying to convey my amendment. So how should I do this?
How about wait for me to share it. We'll put suggested changes from board and you can all edit it to your heart's content.
What platform are you using to share it in?
Google Docs. Hang on.
And
Sharing.
I would
now,
say do suggesting rather than editing though.
please. So does everyone know how to do suggesting mode in Google Docs? Can I just show you right now? It's part of that onboarding thing.
Sure, please do.
Okay. All right. Strap into my messy computer. Everyone see this okay?
Yes.
Okay. So you're in your Google Docs. If I make an edit, like if I were to delete this, that is changing the actual underlying document. So don't do that. Instead, if you have a suggested change, you can go up here, upper right, and go to suggesting, where edits become suggestions. And then if I delete this, it'll say, like do a strike through, but the actual language is still maintained. And I'm suggesting a deletion. Or if I have an addition, I can say, I want to do, I want to add this. And then when we all get together, you can accept that suggestion and that'll be like you edited it. But the idea is that you're able to track the changes in the document so we don't completely massacre what we already agreed on. All right.
I don't want to be live editing a document in the middle of a board meeting. That's not what we're here for.
Sure. I just shared it with everyone, so you all edit to your heart's content.
Well, then we're gonna have to have an executive committee meeting, Dave, because I don't think we want to wait a month. So if you like,
Agreed.
I think we
Happy to
could,
do so. Shelley?
I think we could probably wait a month. I don't think we're planning on doing this terribly soon. If we need to move in August, we can ask you, the executive committee, but I really don't think we're thinking anytime that soon. It's just to have
Yeah, wasn't the idea though, Shelley, that we were going to get this out to hosts who have been clamoring to know exactly when we're going to set a policy or what that policy might be? Sybil was reporting that she would love to have something that she could send out relatively soon to tell people this is what we've been working on and what we're looking at doing.
Okay.
As soon as things calm down a little. So.
But hosts want a date. They don't want to say.
They don't just want it. No, they don't want a date. No, that isn't the only thing they want. Yes, obviously they want a date, but also Sybil said they want to know what that policy would be. So if you look, you can bring in one musician during the daytime, but you can't bring in a band. It has some guidelines that are informing them what our next step is going to be.
All right.
So we're just looking to get that out to them because they think we're doing nothing.
Okay.
I think there's nothing going on.
Okay. Dave, I generally agree that doing committee work on the floor can be not the most efficient way, but can people now see the suggested edits I've made in the document?
Is it in the folder for the meeting? Is that where it is?
It's in the document that Shali created and shared. that Shali
Oh,
shared.
with the link in the chat. Okay.
Well, I took it straight off the drive because I'm on different machines. So,
I don't know where to find it in the drive. Maybe
No,
everyone
I
else.
can't see the changes you
oh,
made.
fuck.
Great. Everyone just click on the document in the chat. That is Google Drive. And right now I see 2 people in here, which is Dave and Susan. Stu, click on the link in the chat and you will be in.
I'm not on the chat on the machine. I'm on a different.
Okay, now you're in it. You popped in.
Okay.
You're there.
But he made the modifications somewhere else, shall
I
we?
made the modifications. I opened, went into, I got it off my desktop. I mean, I went into the docs drive and opened the document that you created at 8 o'clock.
Yep. But when you edit that, then it's yours alone. It's not shared with others.
So he can share that to the folder for the meeting.
Share.
But Shally has already shared a document. Can you take your changes and put them in the document Shally shared?
Can I just, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When you open a document that has been shared with you and you open it like Sybil's report and you open it to make new edits, you are creating your own copy of that in your drive. So only you can see the edits. Yes, you could share it with everyone else again, and that would be confusing. Or you could open the document that you are all now shared on, use suggesting mode, and you can all edit it, and it's already been shared. So that's my only, this is how we edit scripts so everyone can be on it once.
It's called collaboration.
Okay.
So was it that the link that you shared, Shally, wasn't the same?
Oh my God. No, not the same. We should all be using the same link, which is the one in the chat.
Are people seeing the change?
Yes, I am.
We are now.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. When you make a copy, like if it says opening in your Google Docs, it's not, Sybil didn't share a docs, she shared something else that is then opening in your own personal Google Docs. So only you will see it. That's why we want to, yeah. It's a weird feature, but
Dave,
Okay.
I kind of like to call a point of order here.
Go ahead, Dean.
I think this is getting into the types of things that Stuart mentioned. And can't we just ask the staff to, they heard the comments, write a policy up tomorrow, send it to the executive committee and you guys take care of it, or are we almost there?
I'm done. I'm done.
I don't want to look through a tutor on how to do this. Just
No. I'm Dean. I'm done.
I know, but let's it's there. Let's look at it, and if it's good, let's vote on it, or let's send it back to the staff, tell them to pull it out, edit it the way we want, but are we ready or not? I think this is too much here.
Well, I'm done. I've typed, there are only 3 amendments. One is defining the effective date as being recommended by the staff and approved by the board, which means functionally the executive committee. An editorial, just, cleaning up the second paragraph, bold facing the need for masks and clarifying how it's subject to modification.
Yeah, can we agree to move on now? Can I call the question? Yeah, I think we've done this enough, and I don't want to hear any more tutorship. I'm calling the question. I think that's something we can.
However, the thing that you're calling the question of was not what was moved and seconded. So
okay, Dean, I'm going to move the document that people have now seen as the copy that Shally shared with us that I've now amended with suggested amendments.
Okay, and I agree to second that.
we can't modify this after it's approved. You follow me? So this document is available to the board right now for everybody to look at. And if on Thursday somebody changes something, that's no longer what we approved. So we've got to figure out what we're doing here.
One more thing is, no one changed stuff after you approve it, but you can also see the document history and restore it. So if someone completely screws it up and changes everything, we can go back and restore the part that was approved.
May I request a change from Stu? It says they must wear masks. Can you change they to who? Are you saying guests or hosts or?
Well, I assume it refers to guests, but sure. That's fine.
Fine with me too.
Put a space there.
I have a quick question. I don't know if it was already answered, but where it says late night hosts are permitted to bring one guest, does that mean if there's two hosts during the show, one guest in addition to the two? Or does that mean that you can, like if I have someone that's assisting me, is that considered my guest? Or is that, would that be me plus the person I'm working with and then a guest? Does that make sense? Just for clarification.
It's the question makes sense. I don't know what the staff feels about that question.
When we talked about that, we said that if this was a regular person that was going to be assisting you, Rebecca, that was somebody that should apply to be a volunteer. When you're talking about someone assisting you, what role do you see them playing?
Yes, that's it. So obviously I'm not back live yet. I'm just waiting for now. But when that happens, I frequently don't want to be there by myself. So I would have someone that's already on volunteer approval. Everything has been submitted.
If they're a volunteer, then they're not a guest.
Then they're not considered a guest. Okay, so then it's one guest. Okay. Is there, and then there's a 48-hour notice if that would be an exception, or am I reading that correctly?
It's not an exception. If you're going to bring in a guest, you have to give us 48 hours notice.
To have one guest.
Correct.
Okay. Most of the time, the only reason I say this is most of the time people aren't coming out late at night by themselves. So I'm just curious as to why it was capped at one and not like at least in a pair.
I suggest you bring that to Sybil and the staff has to discuss it. So I don't want to, I don't want to, as a board, start making.
I guess some of our discussion was not only that during the daytime hours, but some people feel more comfortable coming in at night. So there's more nighttime traffic. And this was just for any, I know it says for program host, for late night and overnight host, but if you read the first sentence, it says program host and volunteers. So if somebody's here later at night and they want to have a guest in, if they plan on doing some work on any kind of interview or something, and they're going to bring someone in. So that was the part, Rebecca, that without having staff here, we can approve additional people and have more people in the building that are guests. Now that we're recognizing that, you might not have been in, but night times are busier than they have been. So we're already letting a significant, raising the number of people we feel by just letting every person that is already in here doing work have a guest in here if they want to do something that requires a guest.
Mm-hmm. Mine was mainly if, if I'm having an interview or something, like I said, if there's a guest, they usually don't come by themselves, especially late night. Usually people will come in a set
But
of
you can
two.
still use them, we can still show you the materials to interview them multiply virtually.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of people are doing that now. So.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the reason I raise this question is because, like you said, if we approve it and it can't get changed later, then one guest for late night is kind of difficult for safety purposes for them walking in and out of the building to be one person. So I would just think maybe just looking at that portion of it a little bit closer.
Yeah, they can still be dropped off by somebody and wait while they go in the door and stuff. And we do have a policy on the bottom. If you read the last sentence, it's subject to modification as conditions warrant. This is just the initial policy where we're trying to monitor what one guest does. If we're allowing everyone who's here at night, that's a volunteer, to bring in a guest, what happens? We're not going to free it up and be like, it can be 2 or it can be 4 or it can be, this is a starting policy.
Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different, I guess, if you're there at night, but you're not actually on air hosting and doing an interview versus if you're on there, if you're doing after hours work.
Yeah, I don't know why that one says for late night / overnight host when it really, like I said, the first sentence says program hosts and volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Our idea was that it's people other than, it might be a reporter. We're seeing other people doing work here on weekends during all hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just looking at mainly as like when on air, not doing the work, because I can see how that would be a lot of people coming to do work and sitting in random places or doing what they're doing. But if you're actually hosting and then you say you could have one guest, that makes it a little bit difficult if you're doing like an interview situation. As of right now, but like I said, as of right now, I'm still doing virtually, just like you had mentioned. But it just concerned me when he said, well, we might not be able to go back and change this. So I figured I better check at that, because that's not late night protocol to have one person coming in and out by themselves, typically.
Dave?
Yes.
Oh, I think this was an important discussion. I think the way to address it is by amending where it says for late night, overnight hosts, add contributors and volunteers. I mean, doesn't that then resolve the discrepancy?
Could it just say for volunteers and then 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. daily? Does that work? For volunteers during 8 p.m. to, yeah, absolutely. Just take out all modifiers. So instead of identifying it by, let me get to the right document. But I had another question, Susan. If are there programs between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. that have 2 regular hosts? And it was your answer to
Universal Soul Explosion is that way. So
okay. I mean, okay. So we're considering, okay. So if there are 2 people who are regularly there doing the show, that means a potential for 2 guests. Is that right? That wasn't what we were envisioning. If Rebecca has somebody that's putting stuff in Spinatron and assisting her, we didn't see that person as, that isn't a person that gets an extra guest. If Mel and Floyd have a show and it's one guest, not that everybody who, on Soul Sessions, there's 4 different hosts sometimes in the studio. We weren't envisioning that there could be 4 guests. Okay. Important to clarify that. Yeah, I think that should be
I am quite uncomfortable with this continuing editing of a document live during a board meeting. It is a poor use of our time.
Agreed. So what should we do here? I mean, this is taking up too much time and I don't, now I'm back to confused as to what we're going to vote on. So
we have a motion before us in a second, and so we have to have a vote eventually, unless you withdraw the motion, Stu. We can vote to approve or vote to not approve. I recommend that this be finalized outside of a board meeting and brought back in final form, so that we don't have to all check each other's grammar and capitalization and punctuation and everything else. So
At this point, I'm comfortable with doing that.
I withdraw my second. And let's send it back and we can finish this up either through executive or back at the board meeting. It's not that difficult, and probably the staff can tighten this up in 10 or 15 minutes and then we'll have it, and we don't need to spend this time. It's, boy, a half hour we've been on this already.
Yep.
That's nuts. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I'll withdraw the motion.
And then David, I think you can just direct the staff to tighten all this up, given the feedback they got today, and then we can decide if you should send it to the executive committee or to the board meeting. That's
Okay.
It's the staff's decision over which one we send it to.
Right.
And next time, more than an hour before the board meeting.
Well, it was supposed to go out on Monday, that we left it to civil.
Well, we got it an hour
We spent
before.
enough time. Dave, what do you want to do? Direct them to tighten it up, send it to executive committee, and then executive committee can decide what to do with it?
Yeah.
I'm going to refer it back to the staff, and they can forward it to the appropriate body when they're ready, either the staff or executive committee. So
good. Let's move on.
So I think that finishes the music director report. Are there any other action items on any other staff reports that I've missed? Shelley, did I miss any of yours?
Yep. I had a request to the board to allow me applying to a grant from Google. Can pull it up for you if you'd like. It's due tomorrow, so there's not a lot of time. And someone should mute themselves.
Shelley, I had a question. Why did we need to vote on you applying for the grant?
Great question. I believe it is, I can't remember if it's in my contract or if it's in the volunteer handbook, but under WORT bylaws, staff and volunteers may not pursue grants without permission from the board. However, I think it's permission to agree to a grant, and so I could probably apply and then come to you and say, can we accept this money in writers? But
Right.
I believe I'm supposed to ask the board for permission. If I'm not, then I'm happy not to waste your time.
Been interpreted in the past that we have to ask. I had to ask for all permission to apply for it because the board needed to know ahead of time about things and whether they were willing to undertake them. I got in trouble with 2 different major donors who I accepted the conditions, went to the board, and then the board said, we're not going to authorize a position, paying a position, even though the major donor had agreed to a grant, offering to pay for a position for a year to do something. And at that point, it was impressed upon us. And if the board wants to change it, they want to change it. But the past thing was, before we apply for a grant, before we go to it, I was told the board needs to approve going for the grant, not the after.
Huh.
I agree with Susan that's in the policies.
Be happy to have it changed. Think it would be great.
Then I move to accept Shalley's proposal to apply for this grant.
I will second that. I've read the proposal, and I think that it's a great idea, and I like all the potential that has to come with it. And yeah, just adding another staff member to a collective is just ideal in my view.
Well, it's a limited term.
Limited
staff.
term. Okay.
I agree.
Covered by the
I agree with
collective.
your statement.
I just want to say it would not be covered by the collective, and they would probably be paid more than the staff collective members. So that's another reason why they could not be part of the collective, but that's the going rate. So
Sometimes LTEs get that benefit because they don't get any other benefit.
Right.
So I think.
So it's been
I
moved
agree
and
with Thomas.
seconded. Other discussion? Moving on, all in favor of approving, shall I make an application, say aye or raise your hand?
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? The motion carries.
I think Amber abstained, Dave.
Yes.
Okay.
Dave,
I did have an action item in the DEI thing that you were just going to refer, Dave, but I'd like it to at least have it mentioned if people didn't read the DEI report. Because the committee recommended it as a board action item.
Thank you. Thank you. I will share that if I can figure out how to get my machine to work.
Well, it's the very top of the DEI. If you're in the folder looking at the agenda and you open the DEI report, it's at the top of the report.
So you should see the DEI report on your screen right now. And the board action item is the DEI work group recommends the appointment of at least one EEOC officer who does not identify as male.
There shouldn't be a C on there, by the way. It just should be EEO officer.
Yes.
Sorry.
When I got this, I asked the question of Susan, and I've asked this of other staff members, including Doug. Does WRT have a legal obligation to have an EEO officer based on FCC rules or CPB rules?
No, but Sybil said even before she came there, so we've been doing this since before 1995. So we don't have a mandate, but we do have a policy of always having an EEO officer.
We have an informal unwritten policy. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but I'm saying that somehow it's kind of like, adverse possession. You do it for 25 years. It's kind of becomes a policy. And just because of the fact that it's informal, I just wanted to say, because Dave, you had told us you had taken over from Rosie
right
with this role, right? And that this was possibly going to be voted on at this meeting. That's why we put that out there at a point where you decide to appoint someone, the board. We just want to have it out there that it's been a little bit uncomfortable for some of the women at the station who are people who to have to go to what has almost historically always been someone who identifies as male to report a sexual harassment problem.
Understood. If I were a board member and being asked to be an EEO officer without a definition of what that requires, I would be a little bit reluctant. And so that's why I'm trying to say we should explicitly say, what does an EEO officer do? And if there is a complaint of sexual harassment, where are the records kept? What are the rules about confidentiality and so on? And without those things being defined, we're in a mess.
Well, there is a complete procedure that's already been set up for investigating sexual harassments. And there is, right, and that's outside of, I don't know where the actual stuff online in Google Docs or anything is, but it is right outside of Adrian and Doug's door in a thing that says, do you have a complaint? Here's our EEO officer, and here's the procedure that to let you know how sexual harassment complaints and other complaints will be investigated. So it's in hard copy, Dave, and we can make sure that we get that to you.
I understand. I helped write it, but it reminds me of the old joke of the person who goes to the hotel and they're told, oh, you have to make your own bed. And then the person says, well, that's okay. And then they're given a hammer and a saw and some lumber. And so in this case, the EEO person is going to have to make their own rules. But
okay, well, if I could, Dave.
Yes.
There is a link on the website to the PDF for the harassment and workplace violence prevention policy, which includes at the end the harassment complaint form, which says that you may submit this to your supervisor or by email to the address that is identified as EEO@WORT-FM.org, reaches the current board president and EEO officer. So there obviously is, as Susan indicated, an actual process that may be poorly defined, but is defined, and someone has an email that gets them EEO items.
That's me right now. So
okay.
Close to 150.
The two ways to handle the report from the DEI committee are either for the board to direct the appointment of the EEO officer. Is that a board action or a presidential action?
The entire day, every day, all week.
That isn't defined.
Okay, then I think this matter needs to be referred to the Policies and Bylaws Committee to straighten out upon further consultation with DEI. Because this is a policy that should go to committee. So I'd move that referral.
Stu has moved to refer to policies and bylaws. Is there a second?
Okay, then. Yeah, you're gonna come over to Yukito.
Okay.
I second. Can the president second?
Okay.
I would prefer not.
Okay.
I'll second. Laura seconds.
Laura seconds. Okay. Discussion? Further discussion? All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Okay. Are there any abstentions?
Might even be before you or after.
Okay.
But not
The motion carries, and so this will be referred to policies and bylaws, who will resolve it and come up with who makes the appointment and so on. I would like to ask the board members, especially for board members who identify as female, to let me know of your interest in taking this position. I won't appoint you, but I'm curious to see if there's anybody interested in it. So,
Dave, I think the standard is who do not identify as male.
okay. Thank you.
I do want to say that when you asked me, Dave, about whether this was mandated or not, and I started getting into what typically an EEO officer does and reading through the materials, it was pretty overwhelming. I think if someone is willing to take this on, and it doesn't happen very often, but I would say probably once a year, but the amount of researching and stuff that you might have to do is almost equivalent to a committee appointment. So I just want people to be, perhaps regard that if you already have that duty.
We also have, we're required by the FCC to turn in an EEO report.
Which we do, we all work on that.
That's completely
Right.
separate.
But they both have the letters EEO in them, so they should at least talk to each other.
trust me when I say they are completely
They
separate.
don't overlap at all.
No, Tom and Adrian and I are in charge of the EEO report. It's a filing. It has to do with hiring, but it has nothing to do with EEO complaints about sexual harassment or assault or anything like that at the station. It does not get included in that report. It should not be included in that report. If you
Agreed.
want an example of the last EEO report, you can check the public filings, but from my knowledge, the last time the EEO officer acted was several years, like 4 years ago, and it was one report about one instance about 2 specific volunteers. That's the kind of thing that you're getting into. It's a HR thing, completely separate from the FCC report.
So a story that I have to relate is that I used to volunteer for the Wisconsin Feminist Science Fiction Convention. And we had a case of a sexual harassment against a member of an attendee of the con, who was also a publisher, so it was very influential, and had harassed several women. And unfortunately, the communication was very poor. And when that person came back to volunteer at the next con, there was nobody who would say, no, that person shouldn't be allowed to volunteer. So what I'm saying is we have to figure out a way to stop someone from who is a threat from coming back. And so we have to decide what to do when action is taken. And so that should be part of what the Policies and Bylaws Committee does. So that makes sense, Stu?
That's a little broader than I had anticipated, but we can look at that.
Yeah, okay. Other issues of discussion?
Well, I had a question for Susan about donor retention rate and how extraordinary those numbers are. Would I be right in assuming that, well, is there a correlation between legacy shows and high donor retention rate? Legacy
No.
shows being 25 years plus. Or do you not have?
Well, I'm trying to think because there's some overnight hosts who have some late night hours who have been here for a very long time and they still don't take in much money because they're on late night. When you start getting into shows that are on between, let's say, 8 a.m. and maybe 11 p.m., which I would consider, the more, if you're talking there, like on the weekend, and I don't want to call out any particular shows, although, maybe it doesn't matter that much, but there's shows that do and there's shows that don't. And so when you sent me that question, I decided that I'm going to cobble together some reports that I can put together and have exactly that to give to you and to the programming committee, because I think at some point we have to talk about how stagnant our programming is. At least the programming committee seems to want to address that in some way. So it will rank, I will put in order over the last so many years, the shows broken down by how much they bring in per hour. And then we can go through and match that up with how long their hosts have been on the air.
Great, thank you. That'll be very interesting. Thank you.
So I wanted to have that done before the end of the month, but it does take me
Okay.
trying to figure out how to put the information together, a couple of, get it all together in one report.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And David, if I could also give a shout out, even though she's not here, to Adrian and and how great our presence at the Wilmar at the Fête de Marquette was. I mean, it was really, really good. This little volunteer handbook she put out, and the program schedule and the rest of the stuff, and it was just great. And big shout out to everyone who did time under the tent. But it was a very successful event.
or Adrian's report said that the FET was a very successful event in terms of getting volunteer applications. So in terms of community outreach, which I think we're all very happy with that turn of events. That comes to the end of our reports unless somebody has anything else to discuss. We are under 2 lawsuits in regards to the shooting that happened in 2016. 2 people involved with that shooting have sued WRT and its insurance company at that time, Cincinnati Insurance. And those 2 cases have been combined, and they've set a date for July of 2023 to hear those cases. So if we get to that point without a settlement, then I will be one of the people who would be involved in that court hearing. But I'll keep you all informed about what's going on. Any questions?
Yeah, for future reference, that's the kind of report that should probably be made in a closed session.
Okay. I tried to keep it very generic, so but I take your point under advisement. So, other issues of business to be discussed at the WRT board meeting? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Marty, you're muted, but I saw your mouth move. Marty moved. Is there a second?
Sure. I'm second.
Dean seconded. Marty moved and Dean seconded. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Well, welcome the new guys, and see you next week or next month.
I will send out an email about a tech review for people who want to go to that. And my email is always working. I check it daily. So anybody with questions, I'm happy to help discuss things. So good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Good
Dave.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.